Hi, I'm Scott Cosenza, filling in for Sarah Cowgill, along with Lisa Donner, Graham Noble, Dave Patterson, and John Claw. And this is The Conservative Five, a video production of Liberty Nation News. The U.S. is nearer to war with Iran than at any time since the hostage crisis in 1979. The situation seems to be changing hourly, and President Trump has demanded, in all caps, Iran's unconditional surrender. Meanwhile, a maverick Republican congressman who leans hard libertarian, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, has joined with a bunch of Democrats to try and prevent acts of war by U.S. assets via the War Powers Doctrine. Since only Congress can declare war, why even rely on the War Powers Act? Dave, I think the War Powers Act is unconstitutional, but before I pontificate on that sub-issue, tell us, are we at the precipice? And what might some likely scenarios look like for an actual hot war between us and Iran?
The very short answer, Scott, is no, we're not at the precipice. That's not to say that tensions aren't high, and many in the U.S. advocate for a preventive strike against the Fordo nuclear refinement facility and others. In the insanely unlikely event that the mullah's leadership in Tehran would attack a U.S. enterprise, since the Israelis have so conveniently, with their suppression of enemy air defenses operations, left the skies totally open for anything the U.S. might indeed authorize. The destruction of the Fordo facility is appealing. You know, we've got the 30,000-pound GBU-57, what they call the massive ordnance penetrator. But my thinking is, should the U.S. be prompted to action, it should destroy the Iranian Navy and particularly all of its submarines capable of launching cruise missiles, because there are more than 20 such submarines, and they could come out into the open ocean and threaten even the coasts of the United States. President Trump, despite his declaration for Iran's unconditional surrender, I think, has also made it very clear he would attack Iran if Iran strikes the U.S. base, facilities, or Americans. And if that happens, all bets are off, I think. This U.S. position, it's been made clear on numerous occasions that the outcome Trump wants is for Iran to dismantle its nuclear developments, destroy whatever weapons are near ready and open all the nuclear facilities to rigorous inspection. And particularly, what people are forgetting and what the Israelis have not forgotten is he wants them to dismantle the ballistic missile production and the remaining inventory. And regarding your belief the War Powers Act is unconstitutional, well, it's been seriously challenged in the court, as you know, 4 times since 1982, and each time the complaint was dismissed.
Dave, they often get it wrong. I didn't say that that the court agreed with me.
Yes, lawyers lament.
And I will get into that if we have time later on in the segment about why I think that. But before we do, I wanted to ask you, we've seen with the war between Russia and Ukraine, the use of, relatively speaking, very inexpensive drones to wage significant parts of that war to great effect. Presumably, Iran could do likewise. I don't expect it. Sitting here in Virginia, I'm likely to be subject to an attack by Iran. But around the world, we have so many assets in so many places where presumably getting small drones positioned to conduct an attack would not be an insurmountable effort for the Iranian state. Is that something that you've thought about, and how that might
sure
that might work out?
I think you have here the reverse of the small pinprick, moving the large the large immovable object. So what I mean by that is, okay, so you attack a U.S. base or some facility or an embassy with your little drones. The United States will wipe out Esfahan. Is that a good trade? It will wipe out the ports of Hormuz. Is that a good trade? I doubt it. That's not the same dynamic you have with Ukraine, who is in an active battle with Russia, and you're trading back and forth significant attacks.
Well, let me segue to Lisa and Graham, who I want to have weigh in on the political issue. And as an entree to that, I will say, I almost would be certain that Trump at this point would not authorize U.S. boots on the ground in Iran because of the threat of dead bodies coming back and having to meet those, flag draped caskets for a war with Iran. But he may have to do that if they attack U.S. troops in third and fourth areas. And so that to me is where that becomes an interesting issue. But I'll ask you to put a pin in it, Dave, and have Lisa and Graham weigh in. MAGA, a lot of MAGA folks are anti-war and voted for Trump to have no new wars. And here we are with Trump seemingly leading us head on into a war of choice. Please.
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting that Tucker Carlson had a lot to say on this. And Trump wasn't happy with it. And I think Trump is kind of in between a rock and a hard place here. He doesn't really want to get us into war, but he's got to talk tough. And that's what he's doing right now. He's talking tough. And I think MAGA country is supremely uncomfortable with the tough talking. They're supremely uncomfortable with us getting involved. And I think, if we do get involved, it'll just be air support.
Well, initially at least, right? Graham?
Well,
these things can spiral out of control pretty quick.
Yeah, the mission creep is always a problem, although I think it's less likely under Trump because he's very much, he's not a neoconservative. He's not really a conservative either, to be honest. But he's certainly not. It would be political suicide. Well, of course, he doesn't. He's not going to be running again for president. Even within the remainder of his term, it would be political suicide for him to get us into a war. Beyond anything more than perhaps some slaps on the wrist to Iran in terms of, kind of a few drones going over there and taking out some top people or something. And I don't think anyone in MAGA country, as we're calling it, would object to that. But anything more than that, even kind of a large scale bombing campaign of the interior of Iran would even be something that I think a lot of his supporters would not want to happen at all. Of course, the danger, the ultimate danger is that this is really an existential problem for Israel. I personally don't believe for 1 second that if the mullahs in Iran if they find themselves with a deliverable nuclear warhead or more than one, would they have the missiles, they have the means to deliver those missiles, business end first to Israel, they will, I believe that they are crazy enough that they will actually do it. And so I believe that Israel feels it is absolutely imperative that their nuclear program is wiped out. I would very much hope the US doesn't have to help them to do it and that they can do it themselves. But of course, I also believe that if Israel is not capable of doing it, and Iran gets to the point where they have a nuclear weapons, they have the missiles to fire them, and they are on the brink of nuking Israel, I think at that point, politics be damned, we would have to step in and take lethal action against them.
One of the things that's going on, though, is the pronouns. People are MAGA countries are getting very uncomfortable with the pronouns. What's this we, Kimosabi, like Israel and us, it's now we, and people are not happy about that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Lisa. I think that's a bad. I think that's a bad thing. I don't think he should be talking like that. I think his speech should reflect the fact that Israel is a close ally of ours, and it is in a war, and we are, we're on the sidelines, we're observers, but of course that's our ally, so we kind of got their back. But yeah, I agree. When we start saying we, then it's almost you're saying almost de facto the US is already a part of this conflict, and nobody wants that. Among Trump supporters anyway, nobody wants that.
I'm happy to have a discussion about pronouns that doesn't involve trans, he, her, she, him, whatever calling. I saw that Tucker called out Ted Cruz on this when he said, we did this. And he's like, are we at war, with Iran? He's like, no, we just gave support. But I wanted to say, Graham, I don't know that I agree with you that MAGA people will be basically kosher with the support role that maybe includes drone and other strikes on Iran because of basically then, it's the camel's nose under the tent. And I hear you wanting to, or see you wanting to cut in. But before I let you, I want to ask John Clark, because I know he is deep MAGA, MAGA country with many connections high up in that area. And I just want to understand, is he hearing any, what's he hearing about this? Are people behind it? Are they skeptical of this exercise of power, or what?
Well, that's interesting because that dovetails with both Lisa and Graham's comments. Graham sounds sort of the hawk variety, but there are a lot of isolationists within the party that Lisa correctly points out. I think that Tucker Carlson is the isolationist in chief, and the barbs have been flying sharp and fast within MAGA, and the left is observing, look, the right wing are divided over this issue. Well, it's complex, it's nuanced. So are the Democrats. One issue, as Graham alluded to, is, are we really looking at a nuclear-armed Iran that could threaten the region or the world? In which case, do we, as Americans, have interest in that? We, many are saying, are already using Israel as a proxy, and without our munitions, they couldn't fight it anyway. So it raises the whole Zionist versus anti-Zionist camp. This country has a long history of being bipartisan in support of Israel, and now both parties are divided to some degree over that issue. And so there are a lot of fracture points, but of course, Iran is more than just building nukes. It's also involved in the big three H's, the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. So there's a lot of turmoil in the region. And so what is the off-ramp for Donald Trump is a question. How do you defang the Iranian government, which that's another dimension, which is arguably a lot of regular Iranians are not on board with the annihilation of Israel and spending their own treasure on shipping weapons to other nations to engage in that war. And then China has sort of stuck its nose into the midst and is using it as an advertising platform for how much better its munitions are than the Russian weapons the Iranians have, literally. So it really is, it is kind of a mess. And as far as any particular insights, I think Donald Trump has said he's an America first isolationist. He pulled us out of Syria to much opposition by the neocons and the military industrial people. So I do think that Lisa's right. He has a tough row to hoe here. And I think nobody really wants to see war escalate. But as Graham points out, at some point we may have to take this bull by the horns, we, and being Americans, if it leads to preventing a nuclear holocaust. And I don't know what the answer to that question is. I mean, that has a lot to do with experts above my pay grade about how far along Iran really is with its nuclear ambitions.
Well, I can tell you that from the libertarian MAGA perspective, the criticism is that Israel and especially Benjamin Netanyahu have been saying that they're 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years away for the last 30 years to try to goad us into these attacks. But we're going to have to leave it there. And that includes Dave and my in-depth discussion on the constitutionality of the War Powers Act. That's all for now on the Theocracy in Persia. Thank you, panel. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform: YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, and more. We're on them all. Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. And Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm Scott Cosenza. Thank you so much for joining us today for the latest news and commentary. Your choice for free thinking, free speech. LibertyNation.com.